him now as the man who saved a nation. But few remember how many times Abraham Lincoln was broken before he ever wore the title of president. In the autumn of 1832, a young Lincoln stood in a muddy Illinois street, watching the results of his first election come in. He had lost. Not just lost, humiliated. The townspeople barely knew his name. He had no money, no connections, and no reason to believe he would ever matter. But that night, under the dim glow of an oil lamp, he wrote in his journal, "I am not bound to win, but I am bound to be true." The years that followed were a slow grind of disappointment. He tried business, failed. Tried again, failed worse. Debt clung to him like a shadow. Friends urged him to give up politics, to find a safe trade, to stop chasing a dream that clearly didn't want him. But Lincoln had a strange kind of stubbornness, the kind that doesn't roar but endures. He read law books by candlelight, walking miles to borrow them. He studied the way other men spoke, not to imitate them, but to understand how words could move hearts. In 1843, he ran for Congress. Lost. In 1848, he finally won a seat, only to return home a single term later, forgotten again. By 1856, his political career was a string of defeats long enough to wrap around the Capitol. Yet each loss carved something into him. Patience, humility, and a deep understanding of ordinary people's struggles. He knew failure not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Then came 1858, the Senate race against Stephen Douglas. Lincoln's speeches electrified crowds, his words cutting through the air like a blade. But when the votes were counted, he had lost again. Reporters called him finished. Friends pitied him. But Lincoln, walking home under a cold Illinois sky, whispered to himself, "I am not finished. I am being prepared." 2 years later, the nation was tearing itself apart. States seceded, the Union trembled, and the Republican Party needed a candidate who could hold the center. Against all odds, they turned to the tall, awkward lawyer from Illinois, the man who had lost more races than he had won. Lincoln stepped onto the stage in 1861, not as a man untouched by defeat, but one forged in its fire. The war that followed would test him beyond imagination. Nights without sleep, letters from mothers who had lost sons, generals who failed him, politicians who betrayed him. Yet the same discipline that had carried him through decades of personal loss now carried him through the nation's darkest hours. He listened more than he spoke. He chose his words like a surgeon chooses a scalpel. And when the moment came to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, his hand did not tremble. History remembers the victories, the preserved Union, the end of slavery. But the truth is, those victories were built on a foundation of failure. Every defeat had stripped away arrogance, sharpened his vision, and taught him the quiet strength of persistence. Lincoln's life was proof that failure is not the opposite of success. It is the forge in which success is made. And so, when you find yourself standing in the wreckage of your own plans, remember the man who lost more than he won, yet changed the course of history. You are not finished. You are being prepared.